I'm Daniel Levine, and this is the Bio Report. Prescription digital therapies, the use of software to treat disease, are growing in number. Already, there have been 140 prescription digital therapies that have been granted market access through national regulatory and reimbursement pathways. That represents a five-fold increase since 2021, according to the IQVIA Digital Health Trends 2024 report. We spoke to Murray Aitken, Executive Director of the IQVIA Institute for Human Data Science, about the new report, why digital health companies face challenging times in recent years, and why your next prescription may be in the form of an app. Murray, thanks for joining us.
Great. You're welcome. Good to be with you.
We're going to talk about the landscape for digital health, the IQVIA Institute for Human Data Science's new report, and zero in on the area of digital therapeutics specifically. To start with, though, I'd like to go through some of the key findings in this year's report. Let's start with the definition first, though. What do you mean by digital health, and how broadly are you applying that term?
So for our report on digital health, we're really looking across all of the digital health tools that are being developed and deployed in healthcare systems, typically based on mobile devices. So that could be based on smartphones or tablets or virtual reality devices or wearables, and intended to improve health. And increasingly, these are connected to biometric sensors or other kinds of connected devices. They use analytic algorithms or incorporate those in their in the tools, as well as software programs. What we found in this year's report, which is the fifth report we've done on digital health since 2013, is the scope of what gets included under digital health has expanded very rapidly, which makes our report rather thick and content laden, I might say, as a result.
Well, it's moved well beyond the consumer. It's being integrated throughout the healthcare continuum for patients, physicians, providers, drug developers. What's driving the demand?
Well, at some level, the demand is driven by unmet needs. We still have enormous gaps in how patients are cared for. That's always the starting point, I think. But we've also had great advances on the technology front, particularly with the expansion of the number of sensors that are available, bringing data from across a broader range of human factors that can be interpreted. And then I think thirdly, we've had a period of investment and interest, by startup companies and so on to try to bring these products along and bring them into the market. So add all that together, and it's driven an enormous amount of progress and growth over the past few years.
How is the rapid development of AI either fueling these trends and enhancing these products, or benefiting from the real world data they can collect?
Yeah, so we're definitely seeing AI being incorporated into digital health tools in one way or another. And in fact, We talk in our report about 103 mobile digital diagnostics commercially available for health assessment that are enabled by artificial intelligence and machine learning. And about 75 devices are approved by the FDA that incorporate AI. These are being used for things like autism spectrum disorders, sleep apnea, atrial fibrillation, skin cancers, epilepsy, and so on. So we are seeing AI being incorporated both from a sort of diagnostic perspective, but also to predict disease progression, and therefore to personalize therapy and self-care recommendations in light of that. So the influence and impact of AI is spreading rapidly across the space.
Despite all the innovation we're seeing, it's still been a challenging financial environment for digital health companies. What have you seen in that regard? Why is there this disconnect between investor sentiment and the seeming ability of the industry to increasingly produce innovative products?
Yes, we've definitely seen some bumpiness from the investment side. A lot of that is coming off of the what might be called the bubble years of 2020 and 2021, where there was perhaps excessive money flowing into the sector. By the way, not only this sector, we see it in therapeutics as well. Since then, we've had a pullback in the funding over the last 2 or 3 years now, and that has definitely caused some exits, some bankruptcies, some restructuring, and so this has been definitely a factor on the landscape. At the same time, the need and the opportunity for digital health remains as actually larger than ever. So we're working our way through this disruption from the funding perspective, and we see a very positive outlook, again, based on the technology and the need that's out there.
You mentioned the biotech downturn. Was this reflective of the broader downturn, or were there structural problems within the digital health sector that needed to be worked out, such as business models or regulatory pathways or reimbursement issues?
Well, I think we definitely saw the sort of bubble in 2020 and 2021 in multiple sectors, and that was a time when money was essentially free, and there was a big move towards investments in and around healthcare and life sciences, including digital health. We've now come back from those high points. At the same time, the digital health space has had its own more specific challenges around getting clarity for the regulatory pathways that are required, the pathway to reimbursement, and sustainable business models. And again, not all companies have survived those struggles, but many have. And I think the good news is we do see clarification both on the regulatory and the reimbursement front. Today compared to just 2 or 3 years ago, we've got more employers who are paying for digital care programs for their employees. We've got new provider billing codes coming out of CMS and payers that provide payment for physicians who are managing these digital health solutions. So again, we've seen progress. It's maybe a little too late for some companies, but in the broader scheme of things, this has been a very useful maturing, and not only in the US, but in Germany particularly, we've seen a lot of progress both on the regulatory and reimbursement fronts, as we've seen in the UK as well.
We featured a few digital therapeutics companies on the show, but I think one of the things that really struck me in this year's report was how much activity has gone on in the digital therapeutic space. And I suspect others will be surprised by this. Before we talk about the growth in products in the past few years, can you explain what a digital therapeutic is?
So we call a digital therapeutic essentially a health software that is delivering a medical intervention to a patient to treat a specific disease or condition. So it's the fact that it's an intervention that's intended to treat the patient that is really what defines digital therapeutics.
And what kind of growth have you seen there? And what percentage of these are prescription digital therapies?
So we've seen pretty significant increase over the past few years. Since 2021, there's been a five-fold increase in the number of commercially available prescription digital therapeutics, the number of digital care programs, which is a slightly broader sort of offering that includes a digital therapeutic, but also other care elements. That's doubled since 2021. So we've got a lot of activity in this area. We've included in our report long listings of digital therapeutics that have received market authorizations over the past 3 or 4 years. The font on the exhibit is pretty small because there's so many now to include on the page. But I would refer everyone to the report to see more of this detail. But it's a lot. It's a lot.
What kind of a regulatory pathway do these have to travel? And are there significant differences between the way regulatory agencies around the world approach them?
So there are multiple pathways, and I would say this is still an evolving space, particularly when you consider the AI incorporation, which is being deployed in many other parts of healthcare and subject to its own regulatory oversight. But I think we, are also seeing different levels of evidence that's required to gain regulatory approval, depending on the nature of the therapeutic and whether it's considered a low risk intervention or a high risk one. But fundamentally, we're looking for clinical evidence that the intervention works as intended and delivers a positive impact, efficacy for the patient without causing having any safety concerns. But again, the extent of that evidence is dependent on the type of the digital therapeutic as well as the regulatory body that's involved, whether it's in the US or in other countries.
I think the other thing that was striking about this is how the number of indications they're being used to address has really grown as well. Can you give some sense of the range of indications you're now seeing digital therapies addressing?
Sure. Well, we see a lot in the mental health behavioral change space. This is where really things started, and this still remains an area of predominant focus. So that's including things like depression, autism related therapies, post traumatic stress disorder therapies, phobias being treated. But we also see diabetes and hypertension being treated in part with digital therapeutics. Visual impairments, lazy eye, for example, where we see therapeutics, pain, post stroke rehabilitation. I mean, it's a pretty broad range of areas now where there are approved digital therapeutics being deployed.
The other thing that struck me as interesting is we're also seeing the technology expand. These are no longer just apps on your cell phone or a tablet, but they're incorporating things like virtual reality. And how does the incorporation of a technology like that expand the opportunities for indications?
Well, again, virtual reality is a part of a digital therapy that can that can bring benefit to across a range of areas, including stroke rehabilitation, in terms of neurological disorders or rehabilitation, the lazy eye. I mentioned earlier there's a couple of virtual reality solutions or therapeutics for that. So we're at early stages, and I think virtual reality, in general, has a much broader role potentially to play, and we'll see it being incorporated into more of these as time goes by.
And can anything be said in general about the effectiveness of these therapies?
Well, again, therapies that are subject to regulatory review will have evidence of their efficacy. And increasingly now, as these digital therapeutics get rolled out, we're seeing more tracking of the impact that they are having on patients. For example, there's a virtual reality device approved in Australia to minimize pain and stress during needle procedures for children, right? And that's something that we know causes pain and anxiety. Those by those metrics, pain reported by children is reduced by 60%, anxiety down by 40%. That also brings benefits to caregivers, the need for restraints and so on, right? So again, that's an example of where, in this case, virtual reality is being deployed. It's bringing a benefit, and ultimately, is having a positive outcome on patients as well as caregivers. In other areas, we're seeing digital therapeutics being used to treat hypertension, and resulting in lower systolic blood pressure. Measurable benefits coming from the use of the Cure app, HT in Germany and Japan. So the data is coming through. I think we've still got ways to go for the efficacy to be demonstrated consistently and broadly across patient groups. But again, we're making the progress towards that end.
I imagine for doctors who have been trained to think about therapies in terms of traditional medicines like small molecule drugs or even biotherapies, that there's an adoption curve here to think about digital therapies. What does it take for additions to physicians to accept these?
Yeah, I think this has definitely been a constraint on the adoption of digital therapeutics, and it will take time to build that awareness, that comfort level, the confidence that these tools can be used by a clinician to help a patient. But ultimately, that's what it's about, right? And if we have the evidence and physicians see others that are using these tools, we'll get that adoption curve. It also helps if they're being paid to provide these digital therapeutics, the time that it takes to explain to the patient what exactly it is and how to use it. So having billing codes from CMS or from payers definitely is helpful in that sense. But ultimately, it is about increasing the comfort, hearing the experience of others, seeing the impact these therapeutics are having on their own patients. That is what will drive the uptake of these more broadly.
Well, how accepting have payers been? Are they embracing these therapies?
So yes, and again, this is where we see an evolution and a maturing over really just the last 2 or 3 years. COVID had something to do with this as well, but we've got clearer pathways for reimbursement and more payers being willing to reimburse these therapeutics, whether it be NICE in the UK, whether it be the Veterans Administration in this country. Germany has a whole DIGA program that provides reimbursement. So we're definitely seeing expansion in this field, and we are seeing a growing number of these therapeutics that are navigating the hurdles to achieve reimbursement and benefiting from that.
I did want to ask you about the adoption of digital health technologies to drug development. Are drug developers making use of biosensors and other monitoring devices and doing things like developing digital endpoints?
Yes, they are, and we think this is a very exciting area that really brings together both traditional approaches to drug development and understanding disease with the digital technologies that are now available. It not only can make running clinical trials less burdensome on the subjects in those trials, it can also help to generate enormous new streams of data in order to better understand the efficacy and safety profile of a new drug. But we also see the incorporation of digital endpoints that that drugs are now being able to be to use in their assessment. So, for example, the 6-minute walking test has been a sort of a traditional test of for patients with neuromuscular disorders, Duchenne's, and so on. There's now a FDA approved digital endpoint that can substitute for that 6-minute walking test, and which is being deployed again for whether it be for Duchenne's or for patients with COPD or atrial fibrillation. So the incorporation of these digital endpoints into the profile of a drug, and perhaps even tailoring that endpoint to subpopulations of patients or patients with certain comorbidities and so on. This all is opening up new areas for those in drug development to consider as they look to be able to differentiate their therapeutics in the treatment of patient groups.
What's the potential for this to reduce the cost or improve the quality of drug development? And what kind of data can now be captured that maybe drug developers couldn't benefit from previously?
Right. So, I mean, in short, these digital tools and sensors and so on enable capturing of vast new amounts of data, measuring different things and measuring it typically on a or often on a continuous basis. So all of that has the potential to bring a lot more noise into the data set, but also more signal as well. And I think separating out the signal to noise ratio is important. By the way, that's something that AI is good for as well. But in addition, we can see benefits from the incorporation of digital tools into the design of a clinical trial, bringing less burden to the patient participating in those trials. For example, if they can be monitored remotely, then it can reduce the number of times they have to come into the clinic as part of a clinical trial. Reducing that burden on the patient helps reduce the cost of the trial, and is more likely to keep the patient in the trial. So there are practical benefits like that, in addition to gaining greater insight from the flow of data coming from these digital tools.
And how about on the clinician side? To what extent are digital health solutions being incorporated into the clinic to improve diagnosis and treatment decision making?
Yeah, so this is also where we see the potential for digital health far exceeds the current practice, but we're moving in the right direction. Perhaps we can accelerate things, but we are seeing more clinicians gathering data from digital tools and incorporating that into their diagnosis, development of a treatment plan, monitoring and following up of their patients. I think this brings new complexity in the short term to a clinician's practice, but again, ultimately, with evidence that this is helping to improve outcomes, may ease the patient journey. We'll see more incorporation of these digital tools and endpoints into clinician decision making over time. So, I think this is, again, it's the direction of travel for sure. Exactly how fast we're moving down this pathway, still a little bit uncertain, but we remain optimistic about the ultimate endpoint here and the positive impact this can bring not only on clinicians, but more importantly on their patients and families.
As you look across the expanding digital health universe, how do you see this changing healthcare? Will it give the patient consumer more power, better leverage real-world data, allow physicians to do more with less?
Well, I think the main benefit starts with these tools enabling patients to be better cared for, and that better can be defined, based on a deeper understanding of their disease pathology and progress, enabled by additional data being gathered from new endpoints and sensors and so on, but also the way in which that data is interpreted for the development of treatment pathways for the patient. I think we also see a benefit in terms of less burden on patients and physicians as they are able to include these tools in their treatment programs. And a lot of this can come at a lower cost than conventional approaches, particularly if you incorporate the fact that a lot of the conventional approaches end up with suboptimal decisions or treatment plans being developed that then prolong the length of treatment and delays in terms of patient improvement. So to the extent you can take costs out of that, that's good for everyone, including the overall health system.
The IQVIA Digital Health Trends 2024 report can be downloaded for free from the IQVIA.com website by going to the Insights tab and viewing the latest reports from the IQVIA Institute for Human Data Sciences. Murray Aitken, Executive Director of the IQVIA Institute for Human Data Sciences. Murray, thanks so much as always.
Great. Thanks, and good to be with you.
Thanks for listening. The Bio Report is a production of the Levine Media Group. To automatically download this podcast each week, subscribe to our RSS feed or through iTunes or other podcast manager. To join our mailing list, go to levinemediagroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line or are interested in sponsoring this podcast, send an email to danny@levinemediagroup.com. Special thanks to Jonah Levine, who composed our theme music, and the Jonah Levine Collective, which performs it.